Thanks, Mikes. We'll call our meeting to order. Let the minutes reflect all members are present, and we'll set the agenda. Anybody like to add or subtract from the agenda today? Anybody? If not, I'll need a motion.
I move we approve the agenda as provided.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we need to approve the April 10th draft water management plan workshop.
Madam President, I move to approve the April 10th, 2019 draft watershed management plan workshop.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And now we have the May 6th special meeting.
And, Madam President, I move to approve the May 6th, 2019 special meeting minutes, and I think you had something to,
And we had a second, we need a second first.
Second.
Second, and then we'll go ahead with comments.
Madam President, Managers, I just wanted to point out your normal practice under the open meeting law when you go into closed session for personnel or performance evaluation. Your minutes typically won't record that discussion, but you are required to provide a summary at the next meeting. So here you have, in essence, a summary of that discussion provided in these minutes, and I think that's a way that we're meeting the intent of that provision of the statute. But ordinarily,
It
you
would just be a summary.
yeah,
Okay.
just wanted to point
Shorter
that out.
summary.
and Madam President, I move to approve the May,
Wait a minute, we had a motion and a second.
oh, I'm sorry, that's
Any
right.
other discussion on that? We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the May 6th
Okay.
workshop.
Madam Chair, I move to approve the May 6th, 2019 workshop minutes.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And the May 8th.
Madam President, I move to approve the May 8th, 2019 regular meeting minutes.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion?
President Prenner? Yes, Board Managers, on page 15 of the packet, line 140. At the very end, it says Friday. I believe that should be Fridley.
Oh,
All right.
On line 141?
140
140.
at the end. It says
Yeah, I
Friday?
see. It says Friday, gotcha.
yeah, there you go.
Typical.
Okay, anything else? We need a motion?
Oh,
Or do we have one?
I think,
I
didn't
think
we have one?
think-
Okay, so we have
Yeah, we
motion,
did one,
but
and I
we need to
seconded.
add the correction, please.
Motion.
Oh, I accept as the seconder that to have
To
that
accept the
correction.
correction,
Yeah.
okay? And we'll have the motion corrected. All in favor?
Aye.
Consent agenda.
President Prenner, the board has a number of permits for consideration. Staff do have some items to discuss on page 24 of the packet regarding permit file 18-094 for Mill Pond. At the top of that page 24 of the packet, there's a discussion regarding downstream control structures in the public drainage system and the interaction of that with the ponds of the site. I think it's appropriate for the district engineer to add a little bit of comment here so that in the future, if there's ever concerns between the development occurring and the public drainage system, it's clear on the record.
Okay,
Madam President, Board of Managers. To clarify regarding this, as you may note in the ER, it indicates that this project, Mill Pond, drains into ACD 102232 Branch 3. Now, this is the branch that has a couple of those outlet control structures that were placed on there to facilitate the ability of the landowner at that location to continue to utilize the ditch for irrigation purposes. This is a use that had been permitted through the DNR for many years on that property. And so we had worked with the landowner at the time of the repair on the system in order to be able to facilitate that continued use on the system, with the understanding that the use for irrigation would be available if that use did not hinder the ability of the drainage system to function and serve as an outlet. And as we reviewed this permit, we looked at the elevations and the ability to flow through there and how they're operating those outlet control structures currently. And based on that information, we've concluded that those control structures will not have a negative effect on the ability for the water to drain out from that property. Now, just keep in mind that use for irrigation is secondary to the use of the ditch, meaning that if it's determined that how the landowner is utilizing those structures to hold water back, if that is in fact causing an issue with the ability to drain from that property to the west, then the drainage authority still has the ability to modify those structures or modify how they're being used in order to make sure that there is no drainage issue there.
Any questions?
Madam
Thank you.
President, so in the future, and Chris, if the land use changed and the irrigation was no longer being used, the control structures could be removed then, so if there was a change in use of that, correct?
Madam President, Manager Waller, that is correct, yes. We would anticipate that if the land use does change, that there's going to be a substantial modification of the drainage system regardless, but one of those things would be to modify those outlet control structures most likely.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you, Chris. President Prenner, then beyond that one, staff would like to share 1937, which is on page 38 of the packet. There's a few changes within that document that we'd like to bring to your attention. Here you can see on your screen within the table that the reference to permit number 19-036 is incorrect. It should be permit 19-037. And then just a small one here, but it isn't illustrated. At the bottom of the table, there's an asterisk that might be better written to say BMP is oversized, being designed with excess volume capacity. The future use is really at the discretion of the board when that use would come into play, so we just want to make that clear.
okay.
Madam President, I have a question on this particular 19-037. On page 36, it mentions that the applicant must pay the remaining water management district charges associated with this parcel. Applicant in this case is the school district. Was the school district the landowner at the time? Or is it a different landowner?
I understand it to be the school district.
So if the school district didn't have to pay the WMD before, why does it pay for them now?
Change in use of property.
President Preiner, Board of Managers, I'm not clear on the distinction that's being made, and it perhaps is based on your past experience. To my understanding, all parties, including MnDOT and such, are subject to the WMD charges. It's the method by which they're collected that varies between public entities sometimes. But here, the school district is subject to the use of the public drainage system, and so it pays the charge as well. Perhaps I'm missing the question.
No, well, okay, my assumption had been, sometimes we delay collection until the land is sold. And I was trying to figure out if this is
Yes.
a situation where the land had been delayed until it was sold.
Yep.
Chris has the answer.
Madam President, Manager Bradley, I believe in this case, this is on the 5362 system where we had a 3-year charge. And so what we do is if we're in, for instance, the second year of the 3-year charge, they're required to pay all the remaining charges,
To bring the balance down.
yeah, to complete the balance.
Okay,
That answers my question, thank you.
thank you. Anything else on the consent agenda?
I have a
Nick,
question
under-
on
oh,
17-122.
17-122.
Is that not?
That's gonna have a
the next one.
no, that's
coming
gonna have a
next.
variance.
I'll wait until we get to that one.
Okay, Nick, my question is on 19005 Mounds View School in Narden Hills.
Yes. ma'am.
Okay, page 34. We know this is just to the northeast of that wetland that we have, and we've got that weir or culvert and everything that goes, just south of 694 County Road, E2. And the water here, I see where it's supposed to be going from the Mounds View school system here, and then it'll end up in Valentine Lake. Nothing's gonna be going into that other pond, is it? The pond that we've got that's just to the southwest of the property, that goes where we have a district facility. It's on the southwest side, and it's County Road E2, east of 35W. Anyway, the drawing looks like it is,
Yes.
got an area that it's going in, it's going to go to Valentine Lake. Nothing will go in, and we'll have another situation of overflowing or anything on that pond that's,
President Priner, Board of Managers, Manager Hockey, to your question. So I would direct you to page 31 of the document, which defines a table of the different drainage areas of the project. You do see that there is some drainage to the west, to the existing wetland. So in the existing condition, some of it does go there. You can see by the table, the proposed and the existing, that there is a reduction in the volume of water going to,
the west, southwest?
yeah,
A little reduction?
correct.
Okay, I was just looking because you've got the drawing on 34, and I didn't see any blue arrows going that way that
Correct.
indicate that anything was going down there to that southwest area.
Yes, President
Okay.
Priner, Manager Hockey, the purpose of the blue areas is to represent where the
Flow is.
drainage from the new construction or the trigger of the permit and where it's headed to be treated.
Okay,
But there was some discharge to the west already. And
already,
you can see it's reduced by.
no additional,
Correct.
okay, okay. Thank you.
Madam President, Nick, on page 30, second to last line says, the applicant must address recommendation one above. Just a note for future drafting, I would prefer that that was drafted as the applicant must address requirement one above. The recommendation is to do cap rock. If you've met the requirements, 1 through however many, 6.
Sure.
I mean, it's clear what we're doing here, but caused me to stumble.
Yeah, could you repeat that, please,
Certainly.
Manager?
So it's 2 lines up from the bottom.
Yep,
Sentence says, the applicant must address recommendation one above. I'd like to see that read as the applicant must address requirement one above.
very good.
Anything else? If not, I'll entertain a motion for the consent agenda. Page 18.
Madam Chair, I make a motion that we capital 3 items, number 18094, 19005, and 19037,
With corrections.
with corrections.
Okay.
Second?
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, very good.
Now we go into the
Now we go into the
nitty-gritty.
variance. Yes.
All right. Find my place here, just a moment, please.
That's fine.
Nick, before you start the discussion on this, and we do variances and Houston reports to it and everything like that, the extra costs that we do on variances, it's all put into the fee for the applicant to pay for it, correct? So they pay Houston's charges.
President Priner, Board Managers, Manager Hockey, to your question, public entities are not charged fees, so there's a
Okay.
distinction to be made there. Private entities cover the cost of the variance minus the first $500, which is covered by the district. So I believe district's intent is that we get them going with the first $500, but they do provide the other $1,500, an initial amount, to set up the file and get things rolling. Should the review, et cetera, exceed those $2,000, then we would require more money, and typically within our document, we would require them to pay any missing funds.
Okay, that's what I wanted
Any shortage.
clarification of, because it's, Houston does so much work on these that I just wanted to make sure the applicant had some, when they're asking for variance, that they've got a little.
Madam President? On page 49, on paragraph 7, you discuss that the requirement that there would be no permanent structures, impervious surfaces, or landscape features within the easement, except for approved ponding. And then in paragraph 8, you require a recording of the maintenance declaration and drainage of the flowage easements. Should there also be a requirement to record this requirement that there be no structures, impervious surfaces, et cetera, added to that land?
President Priner, Board of Managers, Manager Bradley. It's certainly a valid point. I believe I understand what you're suggesting, and that would bear out in the easement documents that are created. One would be over the public drainage system. The other one is the wetland management corridor easement, and so there's a distinction between the two. There's also declaration of maintenance over the stormwater facilities, and there is also declaration over the buffer that would be established.
So are you suggesting that the easement documents that are gonna get recorded cover this concern?
Yes, Manager Bradley. Excuse me, the district has a number of templates that we work with, and then they are curtailed to address any unique situations within those. The rule does provide for that discretion by saying in a form acceptable to the district. So we will note your concern and make sure that's clear within the document.
Good, thank you.
Usually work with counsel on those.
Thank you.
Okay, to the variance
ahead.
then,
Yep.
President Priner? So usually we do this back and forth a question. We'll try and replicate that here. I'll be working with Chris on that. We'll start with a general discussion, and I will bring up an image, and maybe I can point out any of the items that he's referencing in real time. So, with that. Oh, I think I got an even better image for you. All right, Chris, if you'd like to start the dance and just kind of give a general introduction of the project from so Board of Managers, we are on page 53 of the packet generally. I don't think our intent here, which is a slight change, is not to read it verbatim, but get the gist into the record and certainly in front of you for consideration.
Okay, go ahead.
Sure, are you gonna start with each one of these criteria, or do you?
Right where it says project summary, I'm asking you.
Oh, okay, I see, okay. So, proposed project is a new housing development that includes 65 single-family homes and infrastructure associated with that. Project is located in Lino Lakes, between Lake Drive Northeast and Wood Duck Trail, and it's bounded to the south by County State Aid Highway 14, also known as Main Street. The site is on 3 undeveloped parcels. There's no existing impervious surface area in this location, and these parcels total 94 acres in size. Only 2 out of these 3 parcels contain the development, while the third contains wetlands and a wildlife management corridor buffer, as you can see in the sheet here in the upper right there. Project will add 8.7 acres of impervious area and disturb 40 acres approximately overall on the site. And runoff from the site flows through a series of wetland complexes to Anoka County Ditch 102232, which crosses through the site and ultimately flows down to Marchand Lake, which would be the resource of concern.
Okay, thank you, Chris. And then to the criteria. The first one, A, how substantial the variation is in relation to district rule requirements.
So with regard to Rule F6E2, the applicant has not met the 25-foot buffer requirement at the location along the wetland, they also are not meeting the slope requirement under F6E10-3. Areas where the width is not met are shown in Exhibit A. Multiple areas totaling approximately 0.53 acres, or 4% of the total wetland management corridor, do not meet that 25-foot minimum buffer requirement. Applicant has indicated in their application that there are no feasible design alternatives that would have less wetland impact or would preserve the existing buffer slopes while meeting the project goals and requirements. Applicant has provided 15 acres of buffer area, which is more than the required 14.1 acres of buffer area required per the average 50-foot buffer requirement. Related to the Rule F6E10-3, the existing slope of the buffer is 8 to 1. However, the proposed slope where the variance is requested is approximately 3 to 1, between 3 to 1 and 6 to 1, is thus steeper than existing conditions. And this is 8 individual areas totaling 8% of the total wetland management corridor. These steep and narrow slopes are needed to minimize the wetland fill at these locations.
President Preiner, Board of Managers, if I could, you'll see on your screen the buffer slope variance areas in purple here. The green area is the buffer to the wetlands. This is all part of your comprehensive wetland protection and management plan portion of your rule. When you know the drill, I would say, when we have these developments and you're trying to squeeze infrastructure and development around natural features, it can be a challenge, and we hope to address the way the rule deals with this maybe a little better in the future. Nonetheless, we need the applicant is asking for the variance. What I would say about the slope, when you put the homes in or develop the pads, you need slope in order to get the water to the water treatment features, et cetera. You raise them, and the only way to decrease the slope is either eliminate the lots or get a variance. So in these cases, it's typically backyard runoff that would come to these areas, and it's not maybe as big a concern as it might be in other situations. With that, I'll go on to the next criteria, which is B, the effect the variance would have on government services.
Based on our review, the issuance of a variance for the Nature's Refuge project is not expected to increase flooding, and we'll be discussing that with the next criterion. And it will not have any negative effect on government services. Applicant has maximized the amount of buffer without decreasing the original footprint.
Okay, and then criterion C, which you can see on the bottom of page 53, has a number of factors considering whether it's a substantial change in the character of the water resources of the watershed district. One being water quality, 2, the presence or potential impact of special water bodies, 3, flooding, and so forth. Chris, what did they find in regards to that?
So Marchand Lake, which ultimately receives the drainage from the project, is listed on the Section 303D impaired water list. The affected designated use of this water body is aquatic recreation with the pollutant or stressor of nutrient and eutrophication biological indicators. Drainage patterns and treatment have not changed from the original site footprint. So the project as a whole is not expected to cause adverse impacts. And again, the project is meeting the district's water quality rule requirements. Approximately 100% of this impervious area is treated by these requirements. Therefore, it's not likely that Marchand Lake will be negatively affected by the reduced buffer widths.
And then further for criterion C, whether there'll be a negative effect on the neighboring properties, that criterion further goes on to ask whether it will be a cause or contribute to the 100-year floodplain, increase the frequency or magnitude of flood damages, or increase hardship for downstream property owners, or the flood duration. And Chris, what did they find there?
The proposed variance is for buffer requirements which have a minimal effect on flood elevations. Applicant has complied with the Rule C, stormwater requirements for peak runoff rate control, and Rule E requirements for floodplain mitigation. Project will, in fact, create a net increase of 47,485 cubic yards of floodplain storage. The granting of the variance will not cause an adverse impact to the adjacent wetlands. Overall, the proposed project, even with the variance, represents an upgrade in environmental condition as compared to the existing altered conditions. Granting of the variance represents a loss in opportunity for additional habitat and pollutant removal through the native vegetation, but would not be an adverse impact compared with the existing conditions.
And the existing condition is it's an ag field, and they're obviously tilling as much of the property as they can, given the conditions. Moving on to criterion D, whether the practical difficulty can be alleviated by a feasible method other than a variance.
The applicant has indicated that the project cannot be built without the variance, as the footprint cannot be reduced. District engineer has not evaluated the economics of this project. That's not something that we do as part of this process. However, the entire site is comprised of the development area, the wetlands, and the buffer. Therefore, to meet the buffer, minimum buffer width and slope requirements, additional wetland could be filled to create the buffer. However, this is not considered acceptable under the Wetland Conservation Act and wouldn't be considered prudent.
Okay, and then criterion E, how the practical difficulty occurred, including whether the landowner created the need for the variance.
We find that the current landowner did not cause the situation which led to the practical difficulty. The need for the variance was created by the need to construct the project site. And per this discussion we've had already here, the applicant has indicated that to meet the project goals while minimizing the impact of wetlands and improving the buffer sheet flow characteristics, there would be no feasible way to complete the project without a variance due to the location and geometry of the multiple adjacent wetlands.
And finally, criterion F, whether in light of all the above factors, allowing the variance will serve in the interests of justice.
As always, this criterion lies in the board's discretion and domain, and it involves judgments of a non-technical nature. One criteria we do consider when looking at this variance is determining whether the portion of the practical difficulty standard, if there's an ability or inability of the permit applicant with similar conditions to comply with the buffer requirements under Rule F6E. And I'll note that other applicants have had the ability to feasibly meet these requirements, but the applicants that have met these requirements do so because their sites do not have the same constraints that this one has.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Madam Chair. Because I know that when we do a variance, in effect, we've changed our law. Now, I know that when it comes to discussion like we're having now, that any other applicant coming in that has similar things, they have to be exactly the same to be able to accept, because we're doing what, 15-foot buffers instead of 25-foot buffers? And we've got a slope problem, right?
Correct.
Okay, so we're not supposed to consider anything to do with their economics, but we know that whoever's developing this, I understand, you want to be able to optimize your pads, your homes, your property and everything like that, optimize it. So when we're doing this, this would be the same discussion somebody else over here would come up and ask us the same thing to get a 15-foot buffer instead of the 25, because they, in their mind, they want to make sure that they optimize the development of their property too. So to say that this is needed because of particular aspects of this, it's, and we can't talk economics. We know that it's so that person can develop as much as they can. The next person over here is going to want to also develop the most they can. So since this one gets 15-foot buffers, I would think that this one over here would also say and ask the same thing.
Can I go to Louis on this for a second? These do not become precedents. So just because we approve one does not necessarily mean the next one could be approved. Am I correct?
Madam President, managers, I guess my answer would be yes and no.
Okay.
In that you do have generally a requirement to be reasonable and apply your requirements consistently. Variances always present unique factors, and you can almost always distinguish one project from the next. But, so I think the point of keeping in mind that you want to approach these issues of buffer variance consistently is an important point. But each project is likely going to present unique circumstances.
Okay.
I know from my planning commission days and council days that once you do something that is, if there's something else that comes up very similar to it, you do end up having to do the same thing.
Go ahead.
So this is the first request we've had where they haven't come up with a solution that provided us equal alternatives. In the past, it's been curbs and gutters that took the water to storm sewers rather than avoiding putting the water into the marshes. So this is, really, as far as I'm concerned, in 4.5 years, the first true variance request I've seen, which tells me that normally you can solve this problem. And of course, you could have solved half the problem by having about 5 less lots. Is there a storm sewer here, Nick?
Board of Managers, Manager Bradley, yes, there is a storm sewer system to collect the water and to put it into the ponds.
Is there any analysis here about why storms and, or why curbs and gutters couldn't solve particularly area A and D and E and F?
Covers the whole thing. There's your alphabet.
So, I'll just use area A first, and
Yeah.
we'll go through them as you see fit. Manager Bradley, so area A is to the slope coming off the road. The road is elevated for the collection of the water, but then once it's in the pipe, we have to get it to the ponding or such. And so that grade differential that's needed is part of the rationale. When the road goes up, the slope coming off the road gets steeper. So there it's a slope variance, but you can see the buffer area in green, which would also include the purple, is being met. And there we have curb and gutter on a city street, proposed city street.
So all we're doing, quote, in A is increasing the burden on the buffer by having a higher slope coming into it.
Correct. So,
Okay.
in the past, I believe, Manager Bradley, Board of Managers, that we've considered the slope to be a portion of the stormwater interests of the regulation. And here, since the water isn't directly flowing off the road and down the slope, the potential for erosion and such, and the need for the flatness is perhaps reduced.
Are you suggesting that we're not concerned about water flowing off that road into that A area?
Generally, I wouldn't say not concerned, but it's part of your consideration of the facts in this case. If the water is captured in the curb and the gutter and goes to a storm sewer, it's not free flowing over the surface flow to sheet flow down the bank. And if the bank is steep, the potential for erosion is greater.
Okay. So again, a curb and gutter may be of value there.
Correct.
All right.
And, pardon me,
Madam President, I would like to see this tabled until we get a response about the feasibility of putting curbs and gutters in here to solve this problem.
Go ahead.
I think,
Got two hands here.
I'm
Go ahead.
sorry, President Priner, Board of Managers, and Manager Bradley, I'm sorry, I believe I might be misunderstood. I'm saying there is proposed curb and gutter along the road. So that the issue is addressed. I was trying to make the distinction between the two ways it could be designed.
So the value of curbs and gutters have already been addressed by including them.
Correct.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you.
Chris,
Sure.
anything to add?
Madam President, no, I was just gonna.
You're
make
gonna add,
the same
okay.
statement Nick was.
Madam President?
Go ahead.
So, there's public drainage involved in this permit also, as there have in some of the others we looked at earlier today, and this is a housing project. In the past, sometimes we've had problems where the easement that we need or area for to repair the public drainage system over time have been infringed upon. And the culverts have been sometimes placed incorrecly with new road crossings. So my caution here is that the staff be aware that space is needed for the repair of those public drainage systems sometime in the future, whether it's in the next 100 years or so. And that in the audience, I don't know if there's a representative from this group in the audience, but that they also be aware that those are particular items that need to be addressed when you're putting in these housing projects, is that you're not building the shed or the garage in the area so that when later on, when the maintenance has to come through, that the equipment can't perform. And so that's my comment.
Okay. Manager Hockey, anything?
Well, when we have a 25-foot buffer, and we know that we put 50-foot buffers on ditches now in our, of course, agriculture areas or throughout the state of Minnesota, 25-foot buffer seems to be pretty reasonable, and going down to 15-foot, it does concern me.
Okay. Anybody else comments?
one thing, they are leaving it in better shape than it's in now, so I think that's a point of distinction here.
And the only thing I have to say is, having been involved with this kind of projects, it does become infeasible at a certain point because it gets so restrictive. So if there's a way that we can provide, yet keeping our goals, I think that we should look seriously at proving this. So I'll entertain a motion if somebody would like to, for the variance request. Page 42.
Madam President, I move to approve variance request for variance application 17-122 as outlined in accordance with RCWD District Engineers Variance Technical Memorandum dated May 15th, 2019.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Do we want a roll call or all in favor? Aye.
One nay.
One nay, okay. All right, it moves on. Now we need their permit application.
As President Priner, Board of Managers, we do have some corrections to that engineer's report associated with the variance.
Okay,
I will direct you to the screen, and it appears that we are looking at page 45 of your packet. You'll see the additional text in red, which notes along the lines of Manager Waller's concern of addressing the public drainage system.
okay.
Additionally, moving further into the document, I think there's another,
There it is.
large addition. Board of Managers, it may appear a bit overwhelming, but it is just a replication, if you will, of the CAPROC items. It's good for the findings to reflect those things that would later be obligations of the conditional approval. So the first two items, the first is the the declaration for the buffer area. The second is the easement to the district. And then the third item, as I scroll down here, at the bottom of page 6 is a little bit of a expansion of the current text to recognize that the landowner is interested in developing a wetland bank. The property that is off to the east, a large 40-acre
I
piece.
saw that.
Yeah, that is part of the rule requirements for the buffer and easement is being complied with because the rule is triggered, but they're seeking maybe in the future to do a wetland bank there. They are working with Critical Connections. You'll recall Mr. Husfeth, who's assisted the district on other projects. And so when we write that document for the WMC, we just want to be clear with the board that we will put in some language that will facilitate that interest in the future if they should decide to move forward with it.
Okay,
Madam President.
go ahead.
Thank you very much for pointing out about the language in the permit. My concern's a second step in, not that it's just contained in the permit, but that during the inspection phase by the district, that they be conscious that those culverts and those areas that we need for repair at later time are adhered to. I think that in the past, that's where the problem has been, is that the inspection hasn't been close enough to watch, you know, and then years later, we come into this problem. We don't want to have that happen again. Thank you.
Okay,
Noted.
anything else?
Just the addition, the one on the screen now, page 7 of 7, and you'll see the red text there for the maintenance obligation of the culverts in the public drainage system. So that's a change from the materials in your packet, which would be on the top of page 49. Staff have no other changes.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the board? If not, we'll need a we need a motion. Somebody?
Madam President, I move to approve permit 17-122 as outlined in accordance with Rice Creek Watershed District Engineers' findings and recommendations dated May 15th, 2019.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
One abstention.
Okay. And we'll move ahead. Permit number 19-036. I believe we do have people in the audience that are here for that. Okay. We'll go through ours, and then if you want to make comment about what we've said or discuss it further, we can do that. Okay, go ahead, Nick.
All right. Chris, if you'd like to give a general introduction of the project, I'll see if I have a image here that would be helpful for that.
Sure. So proposed project is located on a roughly 10-acre site along Lexington Avenue in Blaine. This is in conjunction with a permit for an after-the-fact construction of the water tower, well, bituminous drive access to the tower, and gravel access to the well with associated wetland impacts. Previously, the site was undeveloped, and the unpermitted work added 0.34 acres of impervious surface. The proposed work included the construction of the water treatment plant 4 with the public works garage, generator and parking, infiltration basin, stormwater pond, and other various site utility modifications. The project removes the existing gravel well access drive and replaces with a pervious access drive that would be stabilized through the use of a geogrid. Project will add an additional 2.42 acres of impervious surface for a total post-development total of 2.76 acres. There will be 7.58 acres of new disturbance. Drainage from the site flows predominantly to the west and north into Nook County Ditch 5362, Branch 2. There's a small portion that flows east to Lexington Avenue. All drainage from the site flows to Golden Lake, which would be the resource of concern. The applicant filed an after-the-fact permit application, number 10-052 for the water tower project. However, the applicant never constructed the water quality BMPs. Subsequent construction of the well and the gravel access drive were also not permitted. Location and placement of the unpermitted wells and water tower and the water treatment plant was dictated by a multi-year well field study performed by the applicant. We'll be talking about that in a little bit here. The applicant and Rice Creek Watershed District have entered in an agreement to resolve the unpermitted actions that I've just detailed, which would include on-site restoration and off-site replacement of the impacted wetlands at a 3-to-1 replacement ratio. Current project also will provide adequate treatment for the unpermitted impervious surfaces under the 2017 rule. The project proposes to restore previously unpermitted wetland impacts to the northwest portion of the property when well 19 and associated gravel drive were constructed. However, the 25-foot minimum buffer width at all points along the wetland has not been satisfied. 25-foot buffer is not met near the public works garage as indicated in further discussion. Applicant will also need to maintain the maintenance access to the to well 19, and this will require a permeable access drive through the buffer. The requirement that the buffer be non-motorized for non-motorized travel has not been satisfied. Applicant anticipates the vehicular access for the maintenance to occur on a biannual or twice-a-year basis.
All right, with that, we'll get into our criteria.
Let me clarify
Yes.
first, the after the fact, I really don't like after the fact issues, especially with a city. Do we have a penalty for that, or is it just the negotiation of more mitigation, or what is our policy on that? Just
Yes.
that portion?
After the fact, the district just looks for an applicant to come into compliance. You did reference the wetland side, which does have a penalty built into it.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
So, criterion A, how substantial the variation is in relation to the district rule requirements. We're on page 73, bottom of 73.
The applicant has not met the 25-foot minimum buffer requirement under Rule F6E2 at the location of the public works garage and access drive, where the project will include utilities. These utilities require a minimum cover, and a 4-to-1 slope was used to minimize the wetland impacts. This does not achieve the required minimum 5-to-1 slope. This portion constitutes 8.3% or 97 linear feet of the northeast portion of the wetland management corridor where the grade requirement is not achieved. In addition to that, the applicant will be placing a permeable maintenance access drive for motorized travel, which does not meet the rule F6E73 requirement that the buffer be non-motorized travel, or have non-motorized travel. The access drive is needed to access well 19 for that biannual maintenance. The purpose of this drive is to provide a stabilized surface for maintenance vehicles to avoid soil disturbance and rutting during maintenance activities. Approximately 290 feet of the access drive occurs within 25 feet of the wetland, which was approved by the technical evaluation panel. To minimize the impact of this drive, the applicant has proposed using a permeable drive. It'll be vegetated with a prairie mix and only be utilized just a couple times a year. The applicant has indicated that the vegetative drive will not require additional mowing or maintenance other than what's indicated in their vegetation maintenance plan, which was submitted with their application.
President Priner, Board of Managers, I'll just note, I think the text says approved by the TEP. It's a supportive position from the TEP that the placement of the access drive, permeable vegetated access drive within 25 feet of the wetland is of not a big concern to them, and they're supportive of its location. They're not approving, you are.
Question, Nick, on that previous. Do you remember when there was a bank that I think was in Island Lakes? What they did is they placed something that's about the diameter of a orange juice can, and grass can grow up in it, but it stabilized the ground. So when you're saying that this is going to have something that's going to still have some vegetation, what type of under stabilization are they doing that still allows the vegetation to grow?
Yes, President Priner, Manager Hockey, it is a geogrid, I'll say. Very similar to what you're referencing. There is a slight correction of the soils with some clean gravel to allow the water to flow into it, and then a grid, let's just say it's heavy-duty plastic or some
Right.
rigid material. This will allow a large truck to pass over it without rutting up the area. They are planting the vegetation noted that is consistent with the buffer requirements. So, is it in compliance with the rule? No, that's why we're discussing it here. Is it in the spirit of the rule? Yes. Staff
Okay,
would say
okay.
that.
I understand, thank you.
That's the green line on the screen.
green
is-
line will be
is
the access, okay.
path, correct. All right, moving on, criterion B, the effect the variance would have on government services.
We have determined that a variance for the City of Blaine project is not expected to complete flooding, and we'll discuss that further in a little bit. Nor will it provide a negative effect on government services. Applicant has maximized the ability of the vegetated access drive and the 97 feet of buffer area, not meeting the requirements to function as a native vegetated wetland buffer.
Okay, criterion C, whether the variance will affect a substantial change in the character of the watershed resources. Again, I'll note those details are on the page there. Midpoint is 74. Chris?
So the project has met the peak discharge and water quality requirements of the district. Thus, it's not expected to change the characteristics of the watershed. Golden Lake, which receives the drainage, is listed on the section 303D impaired waters list. Effective designated use is aquatic recreation with a pollutant or stressor of nutrient eutrophication biological indicators.
And the effect on neighboring properties?
The proposed variance is for the buffer requirements, which has a minimal effect on flood elevations. Applicant has complied with Rule C stormwater requirements for peak rate and water quality. The variance will create minimal loss of habitat that otherwise would be provided by meeting the rule. Per the vegetative management plan, 6 to 8 inches will remain after mowing, which affords greater habitat than allowing an asphalt non-motorized trail. The areas not meeting the minimum 25-foot width will still be planted with the native vegetation.
Okay, criterion D, which is whether the practical difficulty can be alleviated by a feasible method other than the variance.
The applicant, as I've mentioned before, has previously completed a multi-year study to determine the layout of the municipal well field and water treatment plant. The study determined that the best location for productive municipal wells was a corridor that generally ran along the area west of Lexington Avenue, beginning at Woodland Parkway, to just north of 125th Avenue on the eastern side of Lexington Avenue. The city owns 2 parcels of land within the zone, one of which is the subject property, and the other is the entrance to the Blaine Wetlands Sanctuary. City wells must be either located on city property or within an easement controlled by the city. The water treatment plant also needs to be owned by, be on a city-owned property. The city desired to have these wells on city-owned property rather than private property within an easement where the city would have less control on what occurred around the well. Therefore, 2 of the municipal wells were located on the subject property, and to meet quarter-mile separation, 1 well had to be located on the westerly side, which is well 19 of the property, and the other on the easterly side. The water treatment plant is located on the parcel in a manner that makes connection to the municipal well's water tower and the existing water main infrastructure feasible and efficient. The city does not own another site that would be more suitable for the water treatment plant. The proposed project plan was designed to avoid and minimize wetland impacts to the maximum extent possible. The project could meet the 25-foot grade requirement by increasing wetland fill to create more buffer width. However, this would not be consistent with the intent of Rule F to protect wetlands. A motorized permeable access drive is needed to provide access to well 19. If this access drive were not installed, vehicles would cause undesirable soil disturbance and rutting when they go to complete this maintenance, thus degrading the quality and diminishing the functionality of the buffer area. The only alternative to alignment of the access drive is around the south and west sides of the stormwater pond, which would route the path through the western wetland setbacks instead of the northern wetland setbacks, and would also not avoid the southern property line setback, and thus would not be a desirable alignment. Stormwater pond was located to avoid the wetland setbacks to the maximum extent possible.
Moving on to criterion E, how the practical difficulty occurred, including whether the landowner created the need for the variance.
We find that the current landowner did not cause the situation which led to the implied practical difficulty. The need for the variance was created by the need to construct the municipal well field per the restrictions laid out above, and the need to have the reliable access to these wells. Per the discussion that I previously had, the applicant finds that there is no feasible way to do the project which meets the requirements of the applicant and the district without a variance.
And finally, criterion F, whether in light of all the above factors, allowing the variance will serve in the interests of justice.
Again, this criterion lies in the board's discretion domain, as involves judgments of a non-technical nature. One thing we will note is that the ability or inability of permit applicants with similar site conditions to comply with district buffer requirements was reviewed. Other applicants have had the ability to feasibly meet these requirements on site because site constraints that we have presented in this discussion were not evident on those previous applications.
Staff's ready for any questions?
Any questions?
Madam President? On page 73, and you mentioned in your comments, applicant filed an after-the-fact permit application for the water tower project. However, the applicant never constructed the required water quality BMPs. Have we solved that deficiency through some other method?
President Preiner, Manager Bradley. Yes, we have. The total impervious area is being addressed with the permit application.
Okay.
And that's shown by the table on page 66.
That is correct.
Madam President, I point out from my analysis, the road solution provides basically the same or better protections as we would otherwise have, so I don't have a problem at all with the road itself, so.
Okay. Would you like to make a motion? Page 62, this is for the variance request.
Okay, I move we approve the variance request for variance application 19-036 as outlined in accordance with the RCWD District Engineer's Variance Technical Memorandum dated May 15, 2019.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in
Only,
favor?
only
Go ahead.
discussion is that I'm sure that this should be an example to all of our existing 27 cities. They come to us first.
Yes, we are gonna talk about that in the future.
We
How
are.
we're gonna handle this.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Madam President, just, yeah, maybe I'd be corrected here, but from somebody from Blaine, but it seems to me that about 16, 17 years ago, you built the first water tower area in there. And at that time, there was some discussion that they would need a second one, informal discussion. So I just want to point that out, that I don't think this is not to excuse the fact that they came after the fact.
There's no
But
excuses anymore.
I wanted to point out that I think this was some discussion to this with the previous officials from Blaine. And second, this is a water tower. Blaine's a very fast-growing community. There are tens of thousands of people that depend on this. And so there's a great public health and welfare need here.
I have no problem with the issue, I have the problem with the
It
application.
was the process, I understand that.
Okay.
And I don't disagree with you, Madam President, about that, but I just pointed out that I think that supports your point of view, is that there's been a long time discussion on this.
And personnel can change.
And personnel have changed.
Madam President, you asked earlier a question about whether there was a penalty, and I assume the answer was yes, and I assume it's because it's a 3-to-1 ratio compared to, what, a 2.5 to 1?
1 to 1.
1 to 1?
Yeah, President Priner, Board of Managers, the district rule in this case is RCWPMP, which is a variety of replacement ratios based on the quality of the wetland. Here, yes, it is bumped up higher than the rule would require. That was a TEP recommendation to the board to have that penalty. I will also note that the applicant has restored some of those areas. If I could quickly, hopefully find the picture. It's at the, whoops. Too many pages, I think. Huh?
Got that right.
A little paper, huh?
Maybe the next. Yeah. There it is. So here you can see the green areas are wetland corrections. So these are areas that were filled from the previous activity. The green represents that the material that's there is being removed and it is being restored to wetland. So that's a labor in itself, right? The cost of all that activity, as well as because the way the Wetland Conservation Act rule reads, these were not temporary impacts because they existed for greater than 6 months. The applicant is replacing for them on top of that. So effectively with that work, I did the computation, I believe would come out close to 4 to 1, which is, again, consistent with WACA, which discusses after the fact being twice the typical rate.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any
And the
further
variance.
discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and we'll go to the permit applications.
President Priner, staff have no changes to that document.
Okay, we'll need a motion.
Madam Chair, I make a motion that we approve Caprock. What are we doing? Which one? Approving Caprock or deny? We're approving, it's a Caprock?
Correct.
Permit number 19-036 is outlined in accordance with Rice Creek Watershed District's engineers' findings and recommendations dated May 15, 2019.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
There you go. Thank you for coming.
Madam President? May I address the board?
Please. Name and address for the record.
Good morning. My name is John Hawkins. I'm the Director of Public Works for the City of Blaine. And first of all, I want to thank you for your consideration of this and also apologize for the past actions. Similar to you, Madam President, there's nothing that frustrates me more than when somebody avoids the process. We create processes, we create rules, we create regulations, and there is always a way through. And when those are ignored, it undermines the credibility of any of these organizations. So it is my intention that that kind of thing never happens again. I've been in this role less than 2 years. I took on these past actions, and that is why we came to you in this manner, making sure that we went over and above as much as possible, worked through every contingency that we could to ensure that this met the district rules. You know, we've minimized to the extent practicable anything we could do there of impacts and other things, and also gladly took our penalties. We want to be a good steward, and hopefully this helps show the new intentions here.
Apology accepted, and thank you for coming forward.
Thank you.
Okay, open mic. Anybody in the audience for open mic? Okay, seeing none, we're gonna move ahead to confirm the interim district administrator, page 89. Well,
Oh, go ahead, I was gonna,
no, I would just wanted to say that after the administrator's leaving, I did ask Nick, as we all talked about in our meeting, to come forward and be the interim administrator. This is the agreement that I negotiated with him, and I would just propose that everybody accept it and that we move forward.
Madam Chair, in a whereas, it's the fifth one, 1, 2, 3, 4. Fourth one down, where, I understand, it says approved leave. Leave, I'm sure means vacation or whatever it is, from June 18th to 28th. Who's gonna serve as an interim administrator at that time?
Nick?
President Priner, board managers at that time, I'll organize as best possible for my departure. I'm gonna go to Alaska with my wife for a little bit.
Don't want any helicopter.
Cruise?
Yeah,
Flight
Yeah.
plans, flight plans.
skip that.
Will be as safe as possible.
Flight plans, yeah.
But the duties of the administrator can be delegated, and I'll do so accordingly, so any signatures, et cetera, will be covered. I'll work with our council and engineers so that the board meeting is prepared. There is one board meeting during that time that I'll be absent for.
Yeah, I know you're very detailed and very, you could dot every I and cross every T,
Yeah.
so I know you'll do,
We'll make sure it's covered.
that you'll have it covered. I know, I understand that. I just want to know.
Okay, we need a motion?
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion that we approve resolution number 2019-12. It's a confirming the appointment of our interim administrator. That will be Nick Tomczyk.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Further discussion? Now it'll be a roll call. Waller?
Yes.
Hockey?
Yes.
Bradley?
Yes.
Wageman?
Yes.
Reiner, yes. Motion passes. Thank you, Nick, for accommodating us on this situation.
You're welcome.
Okay, salary survey option. Nick?
Yes, President Priner, Board of Managers, you did have a meeting with Gallagher Human Resources in regards to the district's pay structure, which lays out the various positions and their low, mid, and high range. They did recommend a adjustment to that for 2019 as well as 2020. That is to address the market as it exists as well as inflation. I did confirm that with the representative that presented to you at the workshop. So this is in document that will update your policy book for those 2 years, showing the adjusted ranges.
Okay. Any questions or comments?
Madam President, at the workshop when we discussed this was not my desired, but certainly I wouldn't want to send a message I oppose it, so I'm going to vote in favor of it.
Would you make the motion?
I would make the motion to approve the 2019-2020 RCWD salary structure, Gallagher's option 2, including the shift of office manager 2 position from a grade 8 to grade 9, and incorporate the tables in the district's employee manual.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Further discussion?
Yeah, I'm opposed to it. I liked option 3. And, but what did you just say before you made the motion? You said at the workshop, what was it that you said that you?
I said that this had not been my preferred option.
Okay, that was not your preferred,
Option 2
is not your
is
preferred
not my
option.
preferred. Option 3 was my preferred. However, I didn't have 2 more supporting managers at that meeting. And rather, I'm certainly not going to vote
No, I understand. My thing, I'm going to vote against your motion because I prefer option 3. I just feel that we have done an awful lot of increases all along. We were just talking about what people, people in an administrative situation in cities, and you've all heard me say this. I know there's a survey done and they try to look everywhere, but the responsibilities are not as large as a county commissioner or a city administrator or whatever. And so we moved this very quickly, and going on option 2 is what Phil said he preferred, and he's no longer with us. But I have liked option 3, and this is the time we're making a motion, so I'm gonna vote against your motion.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. I think we'll go a roll call. Waller?
Yes.
Bradley?
Yes.
Wakeman?
Yes.
Nope.
And yes. All right, any other questions, comments, anybody, discussion?
Madam President, I can understand Manager Hockey's concerns, but I find myself in the same predicament as Manager Bradley. And I think that we should take a look at this, because this is only a 2-year situation, and begin now instead of waiting till later, and take a look at how this is structured, because I agree with some of the things that Manager Bradley and Manager Hockey are both saying about this issue. And I think it needs more detailed study. Because I don't feel the group that they use is broad enough. That's what my point of view.
Madam Chair, that's interesting to hear when, that would have been 3-2 right there, so we'll probably not do it. But whenever you have any kind of a increase, I don't care if they talk about levies or whatever a city does, or they say we're just temporarily going to put on a charge on our Excel billings, and it's a temporary thing and it's going to be sunset. We've got the same thing that happens in the state when it's supposed to be sunsetted on health devices, 2%, and they're gonna sell 1.7 or something. Taxes aren't taken down. So anyway, that's all I'm saying is that we find it's 2 years, but I don't see it decreasing any.
So, Madam President, I think it needs more study. I think Manager Hockey has a point of view here, but oftentimes this is something that takes some time to look at and figure out how this goes, because this is not a new problem.
No, we've been dealing with this since
Yes,
I got
yeah,
here.
for quite a while.
Yeah.
And we have to do something about it. I think that inflation's, from my point of view, there needs to be some kind of increase here due to inflation issues.
But on the other hand, we've also had this discussion enough times, and we have finally thought that we had somebody who was going to do a very thorough study. We used somebody else before, so I'm not quite sure what you feel that you want to have
Well,
it
then
expanded.
let me say this, we've had 2 different groups
That's
do
what I
different
mean.
studies.
That's right.
So what are you saying, we need another group study? I mean, how many times are we gonna hire out to
Well-
have the same study come back to us?
Until he gets the answer you want.
Steve, you're right to the point.
Well, I don't agree with that, but, yeah,
Well,
it's one way to think about it.
that's part of the problem too, I think, I think Steve's right about that, I mean, that's part of the problem.
Well, I'm sure we can get somebody to give us what we want, we just have
But
to
no,
pay for
I
it.
don't mean that,
So.
it's just, this is a lot of subjective judgment.
Well, it always,
Yeah,
any
sure.
study is, yeah.
And,
I
so,
agree.
it's an issue. But on the other hand, Social Security had, 2.3 or something, between 2 and 3% this year? And there's some years where they had none. And so, it's probably a time for a shift, change up.
Okay. Nick, any comments as administrator?
This President Priner, Board of Managers, I think I just recognize that you hired 2 firms that you believe to be competent in the field to review the materials and present them to you. They did with a number of options, and this was their obvious outcome, and the board, as you know, voted to bring this option to the table for a decision. Certainly additional discussion, as the board sees fit, seems relevant. I'll note that from a staff person perspective, you know that other watershed districts and other employers are looking for qualified people, and this is the method by which you show their appreciation for their work and hopefully maintain them in your staff. As we're going through now, when positions change, with those people leaving. That is disruptive, and we have to retrain, et cetera, as we hire new folks, so.
So are we proposing then as a board to make this retro through 2019, or do it when they review the employees? How do we want to have them progress with this?
This is not a raise for anybody, this is a
Yeah.
range.
Yeah.
And so I would say the administrator, if there was somebody who was at the top of range for this year and should have received more but for the range, that would be available to
Okay.
the administrator to address through that, in that manner.
Okay, just want to make sure everybody's clear. All right.
Yeah, and otherwise it'll be effective for
For as they
future,
start
but
in.
we have it so.
Future
in case-
raises.
Yeah,
Yep, so, President Priner, Board of Managers, to that point, I'm understanding you say as the administrator does the review of the positions, raises as appropriate to both, the effectiveness in the position and the market trend. Is that,
that's correct.
With what options?
Said
you
better
say?
than I could.
Yeah,
Within option.
okay, yeah,
thank you.
all right. Thank you. Check register.
Madam President, I move to approve check register dated May 22, 2019, in the amount of $340,586.43, prepared by Redpath and Company.
Second.
Second.
Much more. Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I believe we do have some staff reports today. Who's first here?
Do we really?
No, I'm talking about our staff.
I know, but isn't that a workshop?
Are we going back to that?
I don't think we
Oh, I'm
have
sorry.
really anything right now that we need to do by,
President
I-
Priner?
Yeah, that goes to the workshop.
If I might, staff do have staff report item I'd like to share.
Go
I
ahead.
think you've probably seen the mod summer tour flyer has come out.
Yep.
Obviously, that's
way up in.
not local, so
Yeah, it's
if
not
you'd like
local.
to participate, et cetera, please work with Teresa in regards to your lodging and that sort of thing. And it would be maybe a show of hands of those that may be interested in attending.
Anybody?
Anybody gonna?
It's a
attend?
long
Sounds like a long
drive.
trip.
It's a long trip. And I'm not sure yet since I've been, did not get to
Yeah.
the winter tour, so, I'm uncertain.
I am too. I want to go to that. My relatives, my parents and everything came from Moorhead, so
Sure.
it'd be fun.
Very good. Don't consider my inquiry of your gut response here to be definitive, and if, when you make your decision, please work with Teresa
Okay.
in regards to it.
Absolutely, thank you, Nick.
Okay,
President Priner,
yes, go ahead.
if I could, just to go on in regards to the House file and the Senate file.
Yeah.
House file 2314 and Senate file 2372, just an update that there have been no action taken since their initial introductions. That's it, except for the addition of the authors to that. So, no, neither bill has received a committee hearing.
Okay, so for this year, we can move ahead. Any questions, comments on that?
Madam Chair, does that mean that we'll have a discussion at that meeting, the first in, of going ahead with our next stitch, and we'll be doing that with, and we have a workshop before it,
That's correct.
and then we'll have the meeting,
Right.
and now we know the stand of that
And we'll know
bill.
the status, yep. Anything else? Next thing we have is the calendar.
Madam President, first of all, Wednesday, June 22nd is actually Wednesday, June 26th, but the other question is, if presumably our administrator, for example, unless he's on vacation that week. At any rate, in the past, sometimes we've moved our meeting up a day to accommodate the mod tour. I don't need it moved up, so I won't be going.
So then it just depends how many board members are gonna be attending that.
That's a very good point.
Yep.
because it is at least a, 5-6 mile drive.
Yep.
And to be able to do it, if you wanted to get to the 1 o'clock Board of Directors meeting, that'll be, you will not make it.
Where is that at?
Well, it's going to be held up there in Moorhead at the.
Fargo.
Fargo, Moorhead.
I don't think that's 5 hours anymore, is it? I mean, after the change and,
I don't know, all I know it's long enough, and if you have a 9 o'clock meeting here, you're not gonna make a Board of Director meeting by 1 o'clock.
you're right.
That's
about
my
that.
point, if a
Okay,
person were to go to that.
That's a fair point.
So it's a very good point.
Well, should we
I
just go
would
ahead and
as-
change it? Anybody? Should we move it to the Tuesday?
It sure doesn't
John,
matter
do
to
you plan to
me.
go to that?
No, I don't plan to
So
go
the
to
only
it
one-
at this time. And, because, I don't know what the traffic will be like. That's a trip that can be 4 hours and a half from the Twin Cities, or it can be 8 hours, all depending on how much interference
Or
between
another
here
flood
and
comes.
Alexandria.
It's construction.
It's construction
Yes,
time.
that's interference, yeah.
Well, I guess it doesn't actually, the 4 o'clock or 6 o'clock. I guess leave everything the same way.
Okay.
Because I don't know for sure either.
Yeah,
So
and
if
I'm
something
not sh-
changes and we have 2 members, then we can consider, we still have time to change it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, we have another meeting
Yeah.
yet, so.
Yeah. Okay, well, just so everybody's aware of it, then we'll leave it as is.
thanks for mentioning it, Mike, you're right.
And I think that's about
And
it.
he's not gonna be there for the other day either.
Yes, calendar, managers updates. Manager Bradley.
Nothing.
Wayman?
Nothing?
Hockey?
Nothing.
Manager Waller?
Nope,
And I have nothing, so with that, I'll need a motion to adjourn.
move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion man seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Take a break.
Have a break here.